Focus your attention on the young woman wearing the dark hooded sweatshirt. She goes by the name Destiny Williams. She is traveling toward what she thinks is a job interview that will enable her to accumulate sufficient funds for attending beauty school. Now direct your attention toward the male individual whose arm is positioned across her shoulder. He goes by the name Marcus Patterson. He is the person who created the fraudulent employment advertisement on the internet. In less than half an hour, her mobile device would be permanently deactivated. This was not a legitimate interview, it was a kidnapping. At 8 o'clock in the evening on the 18th of September, 2 hours following the time Destiny Williams was expected to return home, her grandmother placed the initial call among numerous attempts to reach her granddaughter's mobile device. Every single call was immediately forwarded to the voicemail system. The anxiety that had been gradually building throughout those hours transformed into an official report submitted to the Chicago Police Department shortly before the midnight hour. The emergency dispatcher recorded all the relevant information. An 18-year-old female individual possessing no previous record of leaving without notice, most recently observed traveling toward a job interview located in the surrounding suburban areas. To the investigating officers, the preliminary information aligned with a recognizable sequence of events for an individual of her particular age, and the situation was at first processed as a possible runaway scenario. However, the formal categorization existed in dramatic opposition to the actual character Destiny Williams truly possessed. Growing up in the South Side neighborhood of Englewood, she was the reliable presence within a broken household structure. During the time her mother struggled with substance dependency and her father completed a prison term at Stateville Correctional Center, Destiny resided with and provided assistance for her grandmother. She was recognized as dependable and reserved, a recently graduated high school student who maintained part-time employment at the Walmart retail location. Her concentration was completely focused. Accumulate adequate financial resources for educational expenses at Pivot Point Academy to pursue cosmetology training. Her Instagram account was not intended for casual social interaction. It served as a collection of hairstyling and cosmetic application instructional content, a demonstration of her professional aspirations. Her relatives and close companions understood she would never simply abandon her responsibilities. During the time police processed the administrative documents, Destiny's closest friend, Janae, initiated her independent investigation, distributing Destiny's photograph throughout various social media platforms and contacting every person who potentially could have encountered her. Her grandmother emphasized repeatedly to the responding law enforcement personnel that Destiny was definitely not a runaway individual. She was someone who carefully organized her future, an aspirational person who was approaching the threshold of constructing the existence she desired. She had scheduled an interview with an organization called Elevate Marketing Solutions. She possessed a specific address. She possessed a contact name. However, investigating officers were approaching the realization that the initial evidence in the investigation was the initial component of a deliberately planned deception. The individual who identified himself as Mark was an apparition constructed from electronic fabrications. The employment posting Destiny Williams discovered in late August on the Indeed.com website was his greatest achievement of manipulation. Identified as personal assistant and social media manager, the advertisement for Elevate Marketing Solutions employed sophisticated vocabulary, guaranteed a reasonable compensation of $22 for each hour, and provided a seemingly authentic Chicago business address. It was specifically created to appeal to driven young individuals exactly like Destiny. When she submitted her application, attaching a connection to her Instagram to demonstrate her abilities, Mark's reply was immediate and businesslike. Their correspondence, subsequently retrieved from Destiny's electronic mail account, demonstrated a sequence of typical exchanges. Mark performed a preliminary interview through telephone communication, posing conventional inquiries regarding her background and objectives. He communicated persuasively regarding the company's clientele and expansion. He constructed a basis of confidence piece by electronic piece. When the moment arrived for a face-to-face interview, he possessed a prepared rationalization for the meeting place. Their primary business location was experiencing restoration work, therefore they would convene at a secondary office in a Calumet City executive suite facility. He transmitted the address to her and made arrangements to collect her from a neighboring fuel station, clarifying that the office entrance was challenging to locate. It was solely following her vanishing that investigating officers began examining the elements of this narrative. They discovered that Elevate Marketing Solutions possessed no official business registration, no workforce members, and no customer accounts. The seemingly legitimate website her friend discovered was an electronic phantom established only a few months earlier. The executive suite facility on Torrance Avenue maintained no documentation of the organization ever occupying space there. The complete arrangement was a meticulously fabricated snare. Law enforcement personnel would shortly learn that Destiny was not the initial woman Mark had attempted to entice with this fraudulent scheme, but she was the initial victim who had not managed to escape. On the afternoon hours of the 18th of September, Destiny Williams adhered to the directions Marcus Patterson had communicated to her. She boarded the CTA Red Line traveling south to the 95th Street terminal and subsequently changed to a bus traveling toward Calumet City. Her ultimate location was the Shell fuel station parking area. Patterson had specified as their arranged meeting location. At approximately 14:47 in the afternoon, the station surveillance cameras recorded Patterson's black Nissan Altima arriving at the location. A few brief moments afterward, the recording displayed him and Destiny moving together across the paved surface. It was the final occasion any camera would capture her image. Her grandmother anticipated her arrival home by 1800 hours. By 2000 hours, following multiple unanswered telephone attempts that immediately went to the voicemail system, a profound sensation of fear had developed. She contacted the Chicago Police Department and submitted a missing individual report. The department, nevertheless, at first categorized the situation based on the victim's chronological age and the absence of any immediate indicators of criminal activity. Destiny Williams, 18 years old, was formerly regarded as a runaway individual. This administrative determination, although following standard protocol, generated a substantial postponement. The investigation did not commence with the intensity appropriate for an abduction situation. Meanwhile, Destiny's electronic presence had arrived at a sudden conclusion. Cellular telephone documentation would subsequently indicate that her device was deactivated or disabled at 15:15 in the afternoon, merely 28 minutes following the time she was observed on camera with Patterson. In that brief interval of time in or adjacent to that parking area, she had disappeared entirely. During the time, her relatives implored authorities to examine the job interview as a potential investigative direction. The formal case documentation remained in a processing line, awaiting proof to confirm that Destiny had not simply departed on her own volition. The formal runaway hypothesis disintegrated under the significance of electronic proof, uncovered not by law enforcement officers, but by Destiny's closest friend, Janae. Desperately investigating for evidence, she gained access to Destiny's electronic mail and Instagram accounts and located the comprehensive record of her interaction with Mark. She promptly transferred the authentication credentials to investigating detectives. This supplied the investigation with its initial concrete investigative directions, the organization name, the electronic mail address, and the telephone number the perpetrator utilized. Investigating officers rapidly verified what Janae and Destiny's grandmother previously believed. An examination of official business documentation revealed Elevate Marketing Solutions did not have legal existence. The website connected with the organization had been constructed only a few months previously, utilizing a service that concealed the proprietor's identification. When law enforcement personnel traced the telephone number Mark had employed, it returned as a disposable temporary phone activated immediately before he initially contacted Destiny and terminated immediately following her disappearance. It was an electronic obstacle specifically constructed to be impossible to follow. The actual investigative advancement originated from the electronic mail address. Although the account itself maintained anonymity, the IP address, a distinctive identification for a computer's geographic position, was not anonymous. Cybercrime specialists traced the source of Mark's electronic messages to a public library in Gary, Indiana. This altered the geographical range of the investigation across jurisdictional boundaries. Detectives acquired surveillance recording from the library, and on it they observed a male individual corresponding to the description from the fuel station video, utilizing the public computer terminals on several separate dates. They now possessed a more distinct image of their perpetrator, but still possessed no identifying name. The finding also exposed a disturbing sequence. Investigating officers located comparable fraudulent employment postings in Indianapolis and Milwaukee, all connected to the identical operational methods. They were no longer investigating for one missing young woman. They were pursuing a repeat offender predator. During the time the electronic evidence pointed investigating officers toward Indiana, the most essential evidence originated from the tangible physical environment, the fuel station parking area in Calumet City. Detectives thoroughly examined countless hours of surveillance recording from every obtainable perspective, investigating for the automobile the perpetrator had operated. They located it, a properly maintained black Nissan Altima. Although the individual had positioned his vehicle outside of the main camera's immediate observation, another perspective recorded his registration plate as he arrived at the area. An inquiry through the National Motor Vehicle Database supplied the identification they had been investigating for. The automobile was officially registered to Marcus Patterson of Atlanta, Georgia. The identification initially held no significance to investigating officers in Chicago. A background examination disclosed a person with no previous criminal documentation. He was 34 years of chronological age, professionally occupied in warehouse management, legally married, and the biological father of 2 young female children. On official documentation, he was an average suburban household man, entirely separated from the sinister criminal underworld of abduction and human trafficking operations. He was the final individual anyone would consider suspicious. When the FBI and Atlanta Police Department contacted Patterson's spouse, the illusion of his duplicitous existence began to disintegrate. She was entirely astonished. She confirmed that her husband was presently away from their residence, traveling in the Midwest region for what she understood were authentic employment contracts in logistics operations. His journeys had become increasingly regular throughout the previous 9 months, she clarified, but she possessed no justification to believe anything was inappropriate. He was, in her perception, a devoted husband and father figure. With her testimony, the investigation now possessed a definite target. The electronic phantom from the Gary Library and the individual on the fuel station recording possessed a name, a household, and a residential address. The pursuit was no longer for an unidentified shadow. It was for Marcus Patterson. In early November, the investigation reached its conclusion in the peaceful suburbs of Stone Mountain, Georgia. Federal agents and municipal law enforcement officers arrested Marcus Patterson at his household residence without any confrontation. The individual taken into official custody appeared completely disconnected from the predatory criminal they had been pursuing. He was a suburban father figure whose residential neighbors recognized him solely as a reserved, family-oriented man. Investigating officers had anticipated discovering proof of a trafficking organization leader. Instead, throughout his formal questioning, Patterson provided a statement that distorted the complete understanding of the investigation. He did not refute his involvement in Destiny Williams' disappearance. Nevertheless, he asserted he was not a voluntary contributor, but a manipulated instrument in a considerably larger criminal organization. Patterson clarified that years previously, a serious gambling dependency had burdened him with an $85,000 financial obligation to an individual named Donnell Cruz, a formidable personality who conducted operations between Chicago and Detroit. When Patterson could not provide payment, Cruz presented him an alternative arrangement. The financial obligation would be eliminated if he consented to identify young women for Cruz's trafficking operation. His responsibility was to establish the fraudulent profiles, obtain their confidence, and transport them to a predetermined location. Patterson emphasized to investigating detectives that he had attempted to withdraw from participation, but Cruz had communicated clearly that inability to maintain cooperation would produce the murder of his spouse and 2 young female children. He maintained he had only transported Destiny because his own household members' lives were under immediate danger. To substantiate his narrative, And in a frantic attempt for reduced punishment, he provided investigating officers the single piece of critical information they required to expose the case completely: the location of an abandoned steel manufacturing facility off Broadway Avenue in Gary, Indiana. He informed them it was the primary operational center for Cruz's comprehensive operation. Responding to the intelligence supplied by Marcus Patterson, a combined operational force of FBI agents and the Gary Police Department organized a tactical operation. The objective was the abandoned steel manufacturing facility off Broadway Avenue, a massive, deteriorating construction that was a remnant of the city's manufacturing history. In late November, tactical units assembled on the site. They forcibly entered the facility and discovered a completely functional human trafficking operational center concealed within the corroding exterior of the manufacturing building. The circumstances were severe, specifically constructed to confine individuals against their voluntary choice. Inside, law enforcement personnel discovered and liberated 7 young women. They were between the chronological ages of 18 and 23 from different cities throughout the Midwest region, all deceived by comparable false commitments. The finding was a significant accomplishment for the operational force, validating Patterson's statement regarding Donnell Cruz's criminal enterprise and producing the prompt rescue of several victims. The liberated women were transported to a protected facility to obtain medical treatment and commence interviews with victim assistance specialists. But for the investigating officers concentrated on the investigation that initiated everything, the tactical operation concluded in disappointment. As they documented each of the rescued women, the harsh reality became apparent. Destiny Williams was not present among them. The information was a crushing setback to her relatives, extinguishing the final remaining possibility that she might be located alive. The tactical operation had successfully eliminated the dangerous trafficking organization, but it had simultaneously converted a missing individual investigation into a probable murder investigation. The inquiry was no longer whether Destiny had been abducted, but what had transpired to her following Marcus Patterson transported her away from that parking area. With Destiny Williams still missing, the complete intensity of the federal investigation focused on the individuals apprehended in the Gary warehouse tactical operation. Patterson's statement had provided them the trafficking organization, but he did not possess knowledge of Destiny's ultimate outcome. Investigating officers initiated the methodical interrogation of Donnell Cruz and his subordinate associates, utilizing the possibility of lifetime imprisonment sentences to dismantle their maintained secrecy. Under the extreme intensity, one of Cruz's high-ranking associates ultimately confessed. His narrative eliminated any possibility that Destiny might have successfully escaped. He acknowledged that the scheme had failed from the very initial moment. When Destiny entered Marcus Patterson's automobile in the Calumet City parking area, she rapidly understood that the circumstances were not what they appeared. She resisted physically with everything she possessed. In the aggressive confrontation that occurred inside the automobile, Destiny was fatally injured. The associate clarified that a terrified Patterson, never anticipating for circumstances to become aggressive, promptly called Cruz for guidance. Cruz, demonstrating a disturbing absence of compassion, merely dispatched another participant of his organization to the site to address the situation. Destiny Williams was murdered in or adjacent to that parking area on the afternoon hours of the 18th of September. The statement supplied the terrifying method and rationale of her disappearance, verifying she had been murdered within minutes of being kidnapped. But it abandoned one final essential inquiry unanswered, both for the investigating officers and her mourning relatives. Where was her body located? Directed by the comprehensive statement from Donnell Cruz's associate, authorities initiated a search operation in early December. The search location was a barren section of forested land off Interstate 94, just across the jurisdictional boundary between New Buffalo and Bridgman, Michigan. It was there, almost 3 months following the time she vanished from the fuel station parking area, that investigating officers located the body of Destiny Williams. The determined reason of death was established to be blunt force physical trauma and manual strangulation, verifying the aggressive confrontation described by the informant witness. She had been abandoned there since the day of her abduction. The investigation that initiated with a missing individual report concluded with a comprehensive elimination of a multi-jurisdictional trafficking organization. Marcus Patterson, the individual who represented himself as a business professional, was formally charged with kidnapping, producing death, and criminal conspiracy. His assistants saved him from a possible death penalty punishment, but he was sentenced to lifetime imprisonment without the opportunity of release. Donnell Cruz, the organization leader who exploited Patterson's desperation, was arrested in Detroit and similarly received a lifetime sentence. 4 additional individuals connected to the operation were convicted on different federal charges, successfully terminating the complete criminal enterprise.